So I'm going to tell you a story about Wikipedia and me. I was born in 1978. The story is composed of 4 acts, I should have said. And the first act is called Seeing the Light. I was born in 1978 in that very small town in the middle of South Africa called Pietermaritzburg. These were the dark days of apartheid. The country was really isolated, and so it was wonderful when in 1994 we finally obtained democracy and joined the international community. Excited about the world, I went on to study journalism and media in Grahamstown, not so far away. And there I obtained some really important skills like web development and web design, and learned how to be a web queen. We really must get that word back there, web queen, put it out there. So I learned how to be a web queen, and wanting to find my fortune in Johannesburg like the millions of forebears and mothers before me, I moved to Johannesburg in 2000, just as the dot-com burst happened, but still I managed to find a great job at a non-profit organization called the Electoral Institute of Southern Africa. I there worked on their projects around democracy and development in sub-Saharan Africa, but I was also really lucky because at the time we were starting to develop our own internet laws, and we were trying to lobby our government in South Africa to develop internet laws that kept the internet a free and equitable space, a space that was would be more beneficial to the poor. So I was really lucky to be working on those issues, and wanting to go a little bit further afield, I actually moved to this little island in 2003. And I was actually registered to do my master's at this very university in 2003. But instead, I was told within a week or 2 of me arriving in London that I needed to go and meet this man called Lawrence Lessig. This guy, Lawrence Lessig. And it was with some trepidation that I boarded the train to Oxford. I made my way to the Oxford Union, and I proceeded to be absolutely blown away by the force of nature that is this guy, Lawrence Lessig. Lessig was not a happy man. He had just lost a case in the US Supreme Court, and he had been hired by this guy, Eric Eldred, to fight US Congress because they had just extended copyright law for the umpteenth time. Now, a little bit of a technical note about what copyright is and how it works. Copyright is an automatic set of rights, where a copyright holder is granted an exclusive right to make financial benefits out of their work, but only for a limited period of time. After which time, that work, that music, piece of music, that video, falls into the public domain. And in the public domain, these books and these music videos and these works of art and knowledge can be freely copied and shared by anyone. Now, the problem was that Eric Eldred, had started a project where he was digitizing works in the public domain, books in the public domain, and making them freely accessible on the internet. And when US Congress once again extended copyright laws, mostly in response to lobbying powers by Walt Disney and others, what happened was a number of books that were freely available to the public were no longer in the public domain. And this was really problematic because both Lessig and Eldred said that it was important that not all of our culture is privatized, that not all of our culture is held by large corporations, that we needed this public domain and we couldn't keep making it smaller. basically. So Lessig wasn't completely devastated, because what he said in response was, okay, lawmakers, you obviously are in the thrall of big business, but you know what we're going to do in the spirit of the internet, where everyone does things differently and for themselves? We're going to build a public domain ourselves. We're going to build a Creative Commons. And that's what he did. Lessig started a project called Creative Commons that many of you probably know about. And how Creative Commons works is it is a license or a set of licenses that anyone can use and put on their materials, their books, their music videos, to tell others that they are relinquishing some of these rights that copyright automatically gives us. So TED Talks is a really good example. TED Talks are licensed freely under Creative Commons license, which means that we can all go onto TED right now and look at videos, and we don't have to pay a price. And TED can enable others to start projects where they share these videos. So there I was in Oxford University, completely blown away by this guy. So after the event, I didn't know anyone, so I downed 2 glasses of wine, and I marched up to Lessig, and I said, very bravely, I thought, I will want to meet you, Lawrence Lessig. And he said, rather frightened, with a small voice, I just need to go to the toilet. And therein started a great friendship. So, my second act is called California Rulz. Instead of coming to this university, I was probably too young. I got a fellowship to study in the heart of Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. I spent a year's fellowship at Stanford University, and I was working with some of the most amazing people who were running digital social entrepreneurship projects that would bring some of the benefits of the internet to the developing world. And I started volunteering for Creative Commons. And luckily, my sponsor at the time agreed, and a year afterwards, I went back to the homeland and I started Creative Commons in South Africa. This was one of the best times of my life. It was so wonderful to be in the midst of a movement in which a little young girl from Pietermaritzburg could join this international movement of people. And we were really successful. So we did a lot of really amazing projects in South Africa. We also, as executive director of iCommons, which was Creative Commons' new offshoot that would host this international movement of people that were working on open source software and free culture, I worked with people to run conferences and events with artists, musicians, educators, scientists in Rio de Janeiro, Dubrovnik, Sapporo, all around the world. Hundreds and thousands of people were getting together around this wonderful new idea. One of the first licenses of Creative Commons, in fact, it wasn't one of the first, but one of the most important licensors of Creative Commons was Wikipedia. So you probably all know Wikipedia. Wikipedia was started in 2001 by a guy called Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger. And what they wanted to initially do is to build an encyclopedia the way that encyclopedias had been built before. That's when you ask an expert to write about their area of expertise and you build an encyclopedia that way. It took a very long time. So they abandoned that effort and they said instead, why don't we use the software that Ward Cunningham had developed called a wiki? And in doing so, we will let anyone on the public internet build this encyclopedia with us. Now, you can imagine why Creative Commons and Wikipedia are so important together. Because when we contribute to Wikipedia, when we edit the sites, it's important that we have some way, some legal way of making sure that our contributions are not used for profit by any single body. That when we make a contribution to Wikipedia, that contribution ends up in this public website that anyone is freely available then to copy and share. So this is one of our great successes, and as I said before, it was a time of great joy. It was wonderful. It was really exciting and great to be part of this incredible movement. But that brings me to the third act in my story. I was working in South Africa for about 5 or 6 years with Creative Commons and Wikipedia and other open movements and open organizations. And I started to realize that things weren't completely perfect in the world of open politics. And in the world of Creative Commons, for example, I realized that Creative Commons had been built to solve a very US or Western problem. And that was a really important problem. There was a problem that copyright was being used by big corporations to restrict and limit creativity. And the internet held major promise for us to be able to really take this on board and try and solve the problem ourselves. But in my country and in many parts of the developing world, the problem is different. The problem is that we have a very vulnerable publishing industry, a very small publishing industry. And our small publishing industry looks very different from the Walt Disneys of the world. And this meant that South Africa, along with many other developing countries, is a net importer of intellectual property. And that our main problems are that we have very restrictive trade agreements with countries like the US, which means that the law is what we need to really change, and that Creative Commons is really useful, but we needed new solutions and other solutions as well. And then Wikipedia was an amazing site, but I started to hear more and more stories about how Wikipedia was not a friendly place for women contributors, for example, and that only 10% of Wikipedia's contributors are female. And that in many parts of the world, Wikipedia doesn't represent everyone's knowledge. So the studies that have been done to try and place Wikipedia articles on a map have shown that there are many bright spots in Wikipedia's representations of the world and many dark spots. And that really represented for me something that was problematic. And so in 2009, I left iCommons, and it felt like I'd dropped off the face of the earth. It felt like I had no friends, because I had been part of this international movement on my identity as someone who really fervently believed in this idea and this ideal. And I'd lost hope, and I didn't really know what to do. And so what does someone do when they don't know what to do with their lives? I went back to school. But this time, in my anti-clockwise fashion around the world, I didn't go back to Stanford University. I wanted to do things differently. And so I went to Berkeley, the home of the bears. Stoned bears, as I soon realized. Bears nonetheless. It was wonderful. I tried to, not the stone bears necessarily, just being in this place and trying to explore what it was that I wanted to do with my life. All I knew was that it had to be very far from where I had been. But what happened was I was drawn back again. And this time, I was invited to a conference in Bangalore in India. And I was invited by a group that were calling themselves Critical Point of View, CPOV. If you know anything about Wikipedia, you know that one of Wikipedia's most important rules is NPOV, neutral point of view. And so the CPOV people were people just like me from all over the place who were getting together to have a critical, reasoned dialogue about what might be wrong with the state that we were in. And it was like I found a new identity as a critic. And what I learned there is something that I want to share with you, because it's something that has been really important to my life and my identity. And that is that when we think about what a critic is, nowadays the term has been mangled. It often means someone who's like the Debbie Downer, the person who's always finding fault in someone or something. But critic, as it was originally formed, is a word to describe a meaningful, thoughtful consideration about a topic. To be a critic is to actively participate in that thought and that perception of a particular topic. It's about imagining and caring about someone or something enough that you can think about it very deeply and still find weakness in it, but know that you want to participate in its future success. And that was a huge lesson that I learned at CPOV. So because I had to go in anti-clockwise direction, in my fourth act, I found myself back on this little island. Only because I had to go in anti-clockwise direction, and I'd been here, so I had to come back, So I found myself at Oxford University doing a PhD on Wikipedia's systemic bias. So we've done a lot of work on trying to understand at its core why Wikipedia reflects the world that it does, because it's not because they're evil people who edit Wikipedia, although there definitely are some. You laugh as if you know. And so what I've come to realize, and I've had to really think hard about it, is that there is so much to celebrate about Wikipedia and Creative Commons and the world of free and open. Creative Commons and Wikipedia have shown us a green spot in a sea of private industry that the internet has become in so many ways. Creative Commons and Wikipedia have reminded us what the internet was supposed to be about. It's reminded us about the global solidarity that the internet, the framers of the internet, originally thought when they were designing the internet. But the internet needs to change, and we all need to be a part of that change. And so my message to you in this era in which we have stopped participating in the internet and the governance of the internet and the way the internet works and the editing of Wikipedia articles is to please get involved. Find out about the governance of the sites that you use. Find out how they work. Find out why people are complaining that they're not working for everyone. Do this for yourselves, but also do it in solidarity with the rest of the world. Edit Wikipedia about stuff you know about, but also edit Wikipedia with someone who you think might not share the same views as you, someone who might represent some of those blank spots on Wikipedia's map. And if you don't want to edit Wikipedia, I urge you to edit the world in the same spirit of critique that the internet was started for. Thank you very much.